It's great to be back in Central Florida. Some of you may not have cell phone service this morning with what our office has actually been in touch with AT&T, although they have not told us necessarily what caused it. They are working to put people back online, and I don't know if any of you've gone back online. They are focusing a lot on emergency services, and if somebody does not have cell and they can't make a call and they do need emergency text message, if you can get on a data, that is something that is being received from emergency. So they're really working there, and then law enforcement, and then hopefully get everybody else back online. But I mean, it's like you think about just your daily life, like having like cell. It's like imagine if we had like an EMP attack or something like that, what would end up happening in this country? So it's not necessarily a good thought, because you think you're just so naturally reliant on having cell service. If you're in the car, you need to figure out where you're going to go, all this other stuff. So it's a little bit jarring to think about the implications if something like that happened on a much grander scale. We're here today to highlight an example of good government and positive government reform. We were here almost a year ago, signing legislation to bring an end to really an anomaly of local government, which was the Reedy Creek District, that was intended to help facilitate the development of a theme park, but also a community where you'd actually have people living there and voters who would eventually vote and then would elect people to run the district. That never actually happened, so the default of the district was that it was run by a single corporation, the Disney Corporation, and that is just not something that is going to work, or that works in a Republican form of government. So ultimately, the acts that have been done over the last 2 years, really are about who governs in our society. Is it one company gets to call the shots, or is it we, the people of the state of Florida, that get to call the shots? And we made the decision that in any part of the state, it needs to be we, the people, who are calling the shots. And so we signed this legislation last year. We signed the legislation last year, and as I mentioned, I mean, having development districts, that happens all the time. Not just in Florida, but in other parts of the country, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I think this one, when it was done in 1967, that was prior to our current state's constitution, which was ratified in 1968, and it really provided unprecedented authority, partially to be able to streamline the development of the theme park, which was probably effective, and maybe that was one of the reasons ultimately why the company decided to come to Central Florida. But there was supposed to be a community that developed where you'd have people and homeowners, and that just never happened. So you ended up having a situation where this whole district was being run by and for the one company. There were a lot of anomalies over the years people would point out, but ultimately I think it was just a question of political power. They had it. No one really wanted to mess with it in the legislature until more recently. So what the bill that we signed did was to actually impose accountability over this district by creating this Central Tourism Oversight Board, where the governor was able to appoint the people to serve on this district. And we're going to hear from Martin Garcia, who's the chairman of what the SIFTOD, they call it. We're also going to hear from our Secretary of Commerce, Alex Kelly, and then Drew Crawford, who is also involved here, and then Mandy Schaefer, who's a mother locally here in Central Florida. But you ended up having, of course, theme parks, a whole bunch of stuff happened, tenant businesses, all these other things, and yet it was really only being run by one company. Now, we know some of the things that went in, and I was honestly surprised, because when I became governor, I didn't really have a sense of all this, but the amount of special treatment and exemptions under that old Reedy Creek was unbelievable. I mean, if you're Universal Studios or SeaWorld, you operate under a much different set of laws than what you were operating here with the Disney Corporation. So that's clearly an anomaly to not have people, especially in the same industry, treated the same way. So there was exemption from sunshine laws, exemption from regulatory reviews, obviously major tax breaks, no Florida building and fire codes, all these things. The monorail had never been inspected, whereas every other transportation thing in Florida has been subject to that, but they were exempt from it here. So there is it was clearly not a situation where it was emblematic of good, transparent government. So we signed that. It's interesting. When we signed the bill, there was a lot of people claiming that this was going to cause taxes to go up on people that live in Central Florida, Orange and Osceola counties. And I said that was not true. And clearly, you look today, that was a total red herring. Like, nothing happened with that. In fact, and Martin will probably talk about it, this board has been able to reduce taxes for the tenant businesses that are in here, who were basically paying they were basically paying to subsidize the company, so a 7% cut in property tax. But that was one thing people were saying. The other thing they were saying is, well, this Reedy Creek district has racked up municipal debt, and they had done that. I think it was about $700 million in unsecured municipal debt. They had utility bonds. It was close to $1 billion, maybe over $1 billion with all told. First of all, that has not been passed on to anybody else. So that is here in this district with of course, the company being the major taxpayer that will pay that down. But if the district were to be dissolved tomorrow, they have enough assets here where they would be able to sell and do that. So that was another total red herring that they tried to do. So none of that stuff ended up happening. But what has happened is a lot of things designed to have good government. So they conducted a big audit about what had gone on over these more than 5 decades. They had nationally recognized experts come in finance, accounting, governance, urban planning, you name it, and they have made a lot of findings about things that had happened. And some of the things that had happened, I think it's been reported now that there were all these benefits that were given from the company to the people that were running or involved with the district, which is clearly creates a conflict of interest, and it would not be acceptable if you were on a city council somewhere to be getting that. But a lot of what happened was it's just human nature. When there's no accountability, of course this stuff's going to happen. Our founding fathers understood that. That's why they believed in checks and balances. That's why they believed that government needed to be accountable. When you have opaqueness, no transparency, and basically one private company calling the shots, of course you're going to have things like this. So this is not anything unique to Disney. I think anybody in this situation, you would have seen a lot of these things happen. It's just basic human nature that does. So this audit really identified a lot of different problems that are being addressed, and I think it's something, and I'm sure some of our speakers will talk a little bit more about it, but it just shows that this arrangement was problematic, and it was not similar to anything else that we have in the state of Florida, not even close in terms of what we have. So they've been able to take action to remedy a lot of this stuff. It's interesting. One of the things, I think there was a frustration because if you wanted to do business with the district, like maybe you were a business in Osceola County or Orange County and you wanted to offer services, you really didn't have a competitive bidding process where you could offer services. There was the company had certain preferred vendors and you were either on it or you're not. So since the board has taken over, they've opened it up. And guess what? You now have businesses locally here who are competing for and actually earning contracts to be able to do work here. And so just on the buy local, trying to focus on facilitating local buying, that has resulted, look, this is less than a year since the bill's been signed into law. It's resulted in $9.6 million in local contracts and $1.5 million in savings for the taxpayer. So that's a pretty good deal. And that's the thing. What you want here of a local government is you want a government that's working to provide benefits to the people in the communities here in Central Florida. Now, that includes the theme parks, SeaWorld, Universal, Disney, includes all of them. I know only Disney's here in this district. So it's not that they should be excluded, but it shouldn't only be for their sole benefit. And I think they're really correcting in a way that's been beneficial to the local economy. So we're excited to see those results. Also, the district is working to reduce the overall tax burden on residents and tenants. And I mentioned they did the property tax cut. Already they've saved the taxpayers, which are mostly a lot of these tenant businesses, they've saved them $18.4 million just in the last year. I mean, that's really significant. And part of that is the property tax savings, $13.8 million. And actually, even though they reduced the rate because the property values have gone up, the district, is still taking in revenue, but they've reduced that by $13.8 million, and then the procurement savings of $4.6 million. So you see, you have a competitive process, that makes a really, really big difference. And so this is something that has been, I think so far, a really important success. It's a great story about how you can have good government. You can reform when things need reforming. They've also done other things like abolishing the DEI that had been mandated by the district. That's discriminatory. That's wrong. And so they stepped up and did that. So all in all, I think you look back, it's been less than a year, and you see a lot of the progress that's been made. It clearly has defied the pundits and the conventional wisdom and all the narratives that people tried to spin. And ultimately, it's a result that, you now have a local government here with this district that is functioning in ways that are much more transparent, much more accountable, and ultimately much more beneficial to the people who live and work in Central Florida. And so that is a win for not just the people in this region, but it's a win for the entire state of Florida. So I thank everybody that's been involved in this. And we're going to now hear from some of our speakers. So we'll start with our Secretary of Commerce, Alex Kelly.
Well, Governor, thank you so much. And as you noted, it was almost a year ago. You signed the bill. It was February 27th, so just a few days away. And really, Governor, thanks to your leadership, thanks to the hard work of the board, Chairman Garcia, Glenn, thanks to so many of you, you really have created and you're elevating, really a new, fresh ecosystem for job creation, for business formation here in Central Florida, really creating new opportunities to grow. Thanks to the district, thanks to the leadership of the chair and the team, that ecosystem is accessible for small and emerging businesses, startups, that really you now have a community that's no longer sort of subservient to sort of one company, but really is really now accessible to small business throughout the entire region. It's an opportunity that really, as the governor noted, you can fairly compete for contracts, and you have to have free market competition. You have to have accessibility for small and large business alike to truly have a dynamic, thriving economy. And the approach you've taken, really looking at obviously Osceola, Orange, but also Polk, Lake, Seminole counties, is a dynamic approach. You should be proud of that for what you've done. And of course, when there's an opportunity, what we're going to see next, when you create an opportunity for business growth, particularly small business growth, particularly entrepreneurs, particularly innovators, particularly new participants in these contracts and the economy here, you're going to create an opportunity that's attractive for job seekers too. You're going to create an opportunity that's attractive for that talent pool that says, hey, there's something there for me. I want to go there. I want to go to that community because there's great jobs there. And the simple fact, the simple fact is that, Governor, thanks to your leadership, thanks to the determined leadership of the district, and really, let's face it too, the buy-in of local businesses, the buy-in, that's a trust process. Creating that buy-in of local businesses as well, it really will get a economy away from a reliance on one business. And there's nothing wrong with having central key pieces to any economic community, but it's a risk to have a reliance on one. It's a sincere long-term risk and a danger. And, the governor went through some of the stats, but just, adding to that, December 1, since December 1, one of the stats that Glenn shared with me, 689 vendors have registered on the district's doing business web portal. 516 of them, 75%, are totally new to the district, totally new. And along with the millage rollback, as the governor pointed out, you've created an environment that is friendly to business and industry. Business believe they can participate. That only happens if you've created that trust and that confidence. And long term too, what does that really mean? What does that actually kind of mean, tangibly in terms of where the district, where these communities can really go next? Because when you sort of back off sort of onerous government and you inject competition, you inject opportunity, which you must have all of those things to grow an economy, you also then open up additional points of investment. Because from a state perspective, selfishly, a Florida commerce perspective, we have programs and tools to invest in businesses and communities to help them grow, to help inject opportunity into a community. And the private sector obviously does as well. And so you increase that ability to leverage outside investment in the communities around the district. I think back actually to a conversation. I remember this conversation. It was last June. The governor just appointed me to the job. And I was talking with Glenn. Glenn, I think you had been here maybe about a month. And we were just talking through what kind of different programs and tools the state has. And we were talking about small business. I think you'd maybe been on the job maybe a few weeks longer than me. But you said, you wouldn't believe it. There's not really an apparatus here to elevate small business. There's not really an apparatus here to give small business a point of entry. And last year, through our department, through the governor's leadership, we moved out the door over $130 million in small business loans, venture capital tools. There were no participants in this area. There were none. And that cannot be. That should not be. There should be exciting opportunities for entrepreneurs, young businesses, startups to take advantage of that. So those are the kinds of points where, as you work, as you build out opportunity for business and industry, and obviously then the people who are going to get hired by business and industry, you create opportunities then for future investment in workforce, in businesses, in infrastructure. To that end, I just, again, want to congratulate you. For those of you who work here in the district, you should be so proud. Change is not easy, but you've done it. You've worked hard. You blocked out the noise. You just did the work, and you're truly, really changing lives in terms of job seekers and job creators. So just on behalf of the department and Governor, thank you for your leadership in this regard. We're just looking forward to continuing to partner with you and growing those opportunities. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Chairman Garcia.
All right.
Well, good morning. I am honored that Governor DeSantis asked me to be part of the effort to launch the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, which was much needed. The former entity, the Reedy Creek Improvement District, which reigned for 56 years, was arguably the most egregious example of corporate cronyism in the history of modern America. Now, before the governor's bold reform actions, the situation before and after is striking. And I don't want to review with you before the old Reedy Creek Act and after what's happened since the governor had the bold courage to sign the new legislation. So before, Disney enjoyed government entitlements like none ever seen in this country. Shockingly, for more than a half century, the Reedy Creek Improvement District, a government agency, was essentially operated by corporate Disney. It employed the following deplorable practices and policies. This is what was going on here for 56 years. First, district board members were essentially handpicked by Disney, a company that also paid some of the board members' real estate taxes. Secondly, Disney employees who were charged with regulating Disney received free park passes and discounts to buy Disney merchandising. That's a no-no. And that resulted in a $2.1 million fine to the district by the Internal Revenue Service. Thirdly, government contracts were given to Disney preferred vendors, which you just heard about, rather than awarded fairly through competitive bidding to the many small businesses in Central Florida that deserve an opportunity to work here. Fourthly, and the governor mentioned this, tax dollars were spent exclusively for the benefit of Disney properties. And Disney, unlike any other business in Central Florida, paid no impact fees. Paid no impact fees, like everyone else. Disney's assets, private company to government agency, think about that. Disney assets were sold to the district under questionable circumstances. And then finally, and this is something that our board is working on because it requires the utilization of experts. Urban planning strategies were adopted that exclusively benefited Disney to the detriment of the rest of Orange and Osceola County. Do you wonder why you sit in traffic on I-4 and inch along, and the minute you get in the district, there's no traffic? This district has impacted Orange and Osceola County, but hadn't paid the impact fees so that the counties outside of the district could provide the services and the infrastructure that was necessary for all of the residents of Central Florida. Now let's talk about after the governor took action, okay? After the governor's reform legislation was signed last year to essentially create a level playing field for the district, the new board he appointed immediately took action to promote accountability, promote transparency, promote equal opportunity, and to promote more prosperity for more people dealing with the district and working with the district. So instead of acting as a corporate subsidiary for Disney, our board now operates as an independent government agency for all of the citizens of the state of Florida. Now, my fellow board members are here today, and I am very proud to serve with them. And I want to tell you about the work that they have done, okay? I just told you about the before picture under the Reedy Creek Act. Let me tell you about the after picture because of our board's work and this governor's courage to sign the legislation. So let me tell you about this isn't all of them. Let me tell you about 7 things that my wonderful board has done. 1, our board adopted scores of governance policies to ensure government independence. 2, our board replaced a former senior district executive who had a glaring conflict of interest with Disney. And if you want to find out about that conflict of interest and how ugly it is, read the audit report the governor mentioned. 3, our board reduced the tax rate. As the governor said, the threat that his action was going to result in an increased financial burden here in the district. No. Our board reduced the tax rate in the district while at the same time investing in important infrastructure so this district continues to be successful. 4th, as the governor talked about, our board adopted a procurement policy that for the first time in 56 years, affords equal opportunities to every business in Central Florida, big and small, and as the governor indicated, it resulted in a meaningful savings of procurement costs to the district. 5, our board eliminated Disney perks paid to government workers that resulted in that $2.1 million IRS fine, and grossed up the compensation for those workers so they would not be penalized because of Disney's misdeeds. 6, our board approved a collective bargaining agreement with the district's firefighters, a negotiation that had been stalled for 5 years under the old board. And then finally, our board has hired, as the governor mentioned, has hired several of the nation's leading independent experts to advise the board on how to improve the district's financial, operational, and urban planning strategies going forward. And so, look, I am very proud of the reforms that our board has implemented in just 12 short months. I am deeply grateful to the governor for his courage to right the wrongs that persisted here for decades. The district now has a much more just culture and a much brighter future. There is a lot more work to do to fulfill the wishes of the people of Florida under the legislation that the governor signed. And I can promise you, on behalf of my board, that we will continue to reform the district for the benefit of all of its constituents. Thank you.
All right, Drew. Well, thank you, Governor. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. My name is Drew Crawford. I'm an attorney from Polk County. I stand before you today primarily because I am the example of what the Buy Local Now program that's been implemented here in the district and what it can mean for our economy. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and my law firm, and I think you'll understand. So I'm a board-certified city, county, and local government attorney. I represent mainly cities. You probably never met me because I'm down in Polk County. My law firm, Boswell and Dunlap, was started in 1900 in Bartow. And we provided legal services to the Polk County community and area governments in that county for over a century. And what's interesting about that, we have a lot of experience that we can bring to bear. We don't advertise. We don't go out and seek work, but what we do when clients need us, and the only way they tell us that they need us is that they put out an advertisement that says, hey, we would like for you to bid on this work. We respond to that, and we are happy to have those clients, and we have a list of significant public sector innovators, such as City of Winter Haven, such as Polk State College, such as the Polk County School District, and we're happy to add CIFTOD to the list. And I can't tell thanks enough to the governor, thanks enough to the chair, thanks to the district administrator, the members of the Board of Supervisors for that opportunity. So a little bit more about me. I am, as I mentioned, I was a board-certified city, county, local government attorney. I've spent 19 years in municipal law. I've spent 13 as a local government administrative magistrate, handling code enforcement disputes and resolving matters in favor or against just the governments or the folks who appear. And those, I've been asked by by CIFTOD to come in and be the local government magistrate here. And so what does that mean? That means that I'm supposed to do fair, expedient, impartial evaluations, administrative resolutions of building, fire, real property maintenance related matters. And I think the most interesting thing is, this kind of goes to what you were saying, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe there was a code enforcement program here in the district prior to this year. This way we can, the reason why that's important is that like a court, right? A code enforcement magistrate provides a fair, open public forum for resolving these kinds of disputes. But what it really does is it creates transparency. It improves the collective accountability of property owners to each other and tenants and to property owners, so that you lift, like a rising tide lifts all boats. The properties are maintained to the standards that are created. But it increases the public's confidence that local government, which is the one closest to the people, and the civil inspection teams that are employed by local government are accurate, courteous, responsive, and responsible. And that's exactly what I believe that this board is doing. And Governor, again, I thank you for the opportunity to do that. My last thing I want to say, I think it's important too. Administrator Gilzane, I want to thank you and your staff for the bidding process. As somebody who engages in advising local governments on bidding, I got to tell you that your team and the process here that you have implemented in the district has been excellent. It's been wonderful and very professional, and I hold it out as an example for others to follow. So yeah, thank you. So thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, Mandy.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Governor DeSantis, again for an opportunity to speak. I don't know if any of you remember me. If you were here this time last year, I was the mom who spoke as not trusting Disney anymore. And so I still stand here today having that same feeling. I grew up in Osceola County. I was impacted as a child. An adult, my son, Disney was a part of our life growing up, and the memories that Disney provided were irreplaceable, and they'll forever remain in my heart. I stood with you, Governor, as I expressed my disappointment in Disney's decision to speak out against the Parental Rights and Education Bill, and I still stand with you today. Education will always be a parent's job, and entertainment should be Disney's only job. I fervently believe Disney should not have picked this fight. The moral standards of our nation everywhere today are being challenged and compromised. And as a parent, it appalls me that our children are constantly bombarded with immorality and immoral messaging that at home I'm trying to teach my son the right thing to do. So this mama bear will continue to remain in the ring and fight for my child or any child that's impacted by the woke ideologies that are robbing our family traditions. I will continue to find truth. I will continue to love truth. I will continue to speak truth, and I will continue to defend truth. The side of the moral argument that Disney continues to take is wrong. However, I will never lose hope that Walt Disney's vision will be restored and that the woke ideologies will be removed from Disney forever. Thank you.
And so we've, obviously there was a lot of fanfare last year when Disney filed suit in federal district court against the state of Florida over what the legislature did to create this Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. And I predicted then that it wasn't going anywhere. And as you stand here today, that case has been dismissed by a federal district judge in the Northern District of Florida. And I know they said they're going to appeal. The reality is they don't have a basis for this case. Clearly, the Florida legislature has the right to reform a local government structure, one that had all these problems, and now look at where we are. So clearly, they have the right to do it. But it's also the case of what would your relief be? A court's going to order that the old district be restored? I mean, give me a break. There's no court that is not going to happen. So, my view has been that once we sign this into law, made the appointments, we had basically moved on because I knew the case was going to get dismissed, and I knew that the board would be able to reform the way this has gone, and that's exactly what's happened. We also had the issue of, prior to this legislation taking effect, Disney tried to enact with Reedy Creek these restrictive covenants to effectively lock in their self-governing ability over the district, irrespective of the will of the legislature. And that was really a slap in the face to the people of Florida, because the first bill we did was in 2022. People said, oh, the Central Florida folks, the voters, are not going to like that you're holding Disney accountable. And what ended up happening? I was the first Republican in like 20 years to win Osceola County, which is where most Disney employees live. So it was a total. And so if you look at the Central Florida results, like this was an issue in that election. Clearly, we won going away. And so then when this bill, the HB, the special session bill came, we had major majorities in the legislature supported this. Like there was no question that where the people were going on this, and then for them to try to undercut that. So that hasn't worked. We have a declaratory action just to make but I mean, basically the district is operating as if those covenants are null and void, because they are. But that was really an underhanded thing, and so that, I think, is something that has also gone by the wayside. So we're now in a position where we have an opportunity to continue these reforms that are going to be good for people in the Central Florida community, good for the state of Florida, and there's a lot of opportunities here. I mean, I know we have, Universal is going to do the Epic is coming, I guess, in 2025. There's a lot that's been rumored maybe for Disney to do things. And I think that we want everyone to be successful, but we need government to be transparent, we need it to be accountable, and we need it to answer to we the people, not to one single company, and that's what we've done. All right, anybody back there? Yes.
I wanted to ask you, the Senate has a bill right now that would restore the ability for some Chinese nationals to buy property as individuals in the state of Florida for residential development. Do you have any thoughts? Is that something that you would support as governor?
So last year, I signed something very important. We said we took action because we do not want China being able to buy land in the state of Florida. No farmland, no land near military bases, and also other countries of concern, although I think the CCP threat is the most significant. And the legislature, a lot of the language that was there was things that they had suggested in that bill. What I see going on now is attempt to unwind what we've done to protect Floridians against the threat posed by China. So that is not something, as far as I've seen, that is not something that's going to pass muster with me. I think we have to open our eyes. China wants to buy farmland. They want to buy land near military bases. They want to buy land near critical infrastructure. There's a whole host of things that are caught up in this that I think are really, really important. And so trying to unwind that, what we did has actually been a model. Other states are moving this direction. We already survived in federal district court, and I know the appeals court said some of the people that had these transactions prior to the bill taking effect. But going forward, we think it's good. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think what they're trying to do is unwind what we did, and I'm going to stand firm for what we've already done. It's still under negotiation. We're working. I understand it's important to the speaker. You know, I tell all the legislative leaders, I want you guys to be helpful. I mean, I want you guys to be successful. So if something's important to you, I want to try to get it done. But I also think that there are legitimate issues that got to be worked out in that. And I'm somebody that looks at it and says, okay, 13 and under, federal law already says you can't have a social media account. That's not really enforced by the federal government, and I'm fine with saying let's have enforcement. You know, as you get into 14 and 15, I think net it's harmful for them to be on some of those platforms that have certain functionality that is addictive. I agree with that, but I also believe that that parents need to have a role in this. So we're working to make sure that there's a role for parent. You can say it's disfavored or not allowed for 14, 15, but a parent, you know, has the right to opt in if they think, because as much as I think it's harmful to have people on these social media platforms for 5 or 6 hours a day, you know, a parent can supervise a kid to use it more sparingly. And so we can't say 100% of the uses are bad, because it's not. And I'm a critic of social media, but I have to look at this from a parent's perspective. So we're working through those. I don't think it's there yet. Hopefully we'll be able to get there in a way that I think answers the concerns that a lot of folks have, because I do think parents are concerned about social media and what goes on there. And I do think they think it's a problem. But I also think that for people that are, you know, in high school, it's not as simple. I think you got to have some parent involvement. Yes, sir.
About the human trafficking initiative that might be planned for this district with the help of the state attorney and
Does anyone want to address that? Oh, we got the state attorney. You want to come up? Come on, the floor is yours, man. You want to do? All I can say, I think it's great to have a state attorney in Central Florida that actually wants to put criminals behind bars for example.
As for the human trafficking effort, we're working together with the director as well as with MBI and the sheriff's offices locally here to probably try to put something together here to combat a very serious problem that we have here in Central Florida. Central Florida ranks 3rd in the nation of human trafficking reports. The city of Orlando ranks 3rd among cities for human trafficking reports. We recover kids basically on a weekly basis here in our district, in the local area. And it's a problem because we are in a position that we are usually in a retroactive or proactive type situation. We are trying to now take the fight to these traffickers. They are slavers, all right? That's what they are. They slave. They slave our children. They slave like people into work. They slave people into sexual commercial acts. And we want to put an end to that here in Central Florida. And there was no tolerance for that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that, if you look, it's unfortunately, the human trafficking is really, the magnet is when you have a lot of events and things like that. So obviously Florida, there's conventions, there's a whole bunch of stuff. South Florida, same thing. When we have the Super Bowl, which we've had 2 since I've been governor, that's there. So these are things that attract this criminal element. And so we've done a lot in the state to beef up penalties and to add further support. Honestly, we were, some of the previous things had been stymied partially by one of the companies here, of course, in the past. And so I think we've got more momentum, and I think it's great that they're collaborating on this.
SB 1530 about sleeping outside in public. One of the provisions of that is going to ask municipalities to set up an alternate site where people can go and sleep outside in public, but also get services that they may need, including mental health. If an area doesn't have something like that already, what possible help or aid could come from the state to help them set up an area like that?
It's a good question. So first of all, we are not going to let Florida become San Francisco, where homeless are everywhere. We're not going to let that happen. And honestly, if you look in LA, some of these places, that is not compassionate. That is false compassion to say that people can sleep everywhere, harass people coming by, use drugs, open-air drug markets, and all this stuff. That is a society in decline when that becomes the norm. So we're going to be very clear. Now, look, we don't have the same problems at those levels, but especially when you have municipalities where you may have leadership that has a different philosophical bent that I think most Floridians would have on this, there's a danger that there could be something that could explode in one of our cities in Florida. So I think what the bill's trying to do, and I support this, is limit local governments from allowing this sleeping in public. You don't want the homeless intruding on quality of life, on public safety, and on businesses and the economy. And so that has got to be the firm line that you have. Now, I think most people agree with that. What courts have said, and I'm not sure that this is the proper interpretation of the Constitution, but I think this started, during the Warren Court, where they just kind of made it up as they went along, so why not, right? But I think what they said is if you ban sleeping in public on the streets and on the sidewalks, that was unconstitutional unless there was some place to go. So I think Orlando had something that got approved by the 11th Circuit because they had a shelter where there was still space available. So the court said, well, no, you can remove them off the street if there's shelter. So I think what the bill's trying to do is say hard and fast rule. No campments, none of this stuff in public. The average citizen should never be intruded upon because of homeless. And then you did. But then what do you have to do to make sure it survives judicial scrutiny? You got to have sheltering ability. And then if they want to set up some of these sites, it can't just be some site that is like Sodom and Gomorrah, where they're using drugs and doing all this stuff. It needs to be situation where help is available. So would I be willing to help with things like mental health? I would be willing to do that from the state level, because if you look at some of the homeless, it's not just, oh, they need an apartment. You can take some of these people in San Francisco, put them in an apartment, and that doesn't solve the problem, because the homelessness is a symptom of the underlying mental illness that they're suffering from. It's not the cause. So yes, I'd be willing to help with that at the state level. I think that that's important. I don't think it would be something that most communities would need. I think there'd probably be a handful where we would want to make sure that this thing doesn't go sideways, because I can tell you, I mean, you guys probably know, you have people that have moved to Florida in large numbers. We've always attracted people, but particularly over the last 3 or 4 years, you've had people, yes, they were fleeing some of the COVID mandates, yes, some of this, the taxes, but the public safety has been a huge issue. And yes, part of it is you have these prosecutors who wouldn't prosecute, you have police that weren't supported in these areas and weren't able to do their job. But this homelessness and drug use really has hurt the quality of life for people in some of these once very proud and vibrant American cities. So I think that legislation is saying we're not going to let that happen in Florida, and we're willing to take whatever remedial that we have to do to make sure it passes judicial scrutiny going forward. But ultimately, I think the mental health component of this is really, really good. And so the question is, like a San Francisco, their view is they want to facilitate more of this. And of course, you're getting more of it. I think ours, we want to discourage this, and we want people to get on their feet. But at a minimum, we cannot have a family feel unsafe just walking down the street of some place in Orlando or Miami Beach or wherever, because there's a massive homeless encampment that's intruded on day-to-day life.
Amen.
What's that?
Orange County Commissioners back in October approved a special district for Universal and its Epic Universe, a special taxing district.
Well, what I said at the beginning, so there are a lot of districts in Florida, the development districts. When they build subdivisions, they'll do CDDs. So it's not a question of a special district. I think if you look the districts prior to 1968, when Florida's current constitution was ratified, Reedy Creek was one of those because it was 67. They were given authority that would be unconstitutional under the current constitution. So when they're doing these things, there's a valid use for it, but it is not going to be something where the corporation takes over the entire local government and is able to do some of the things that Martin pointed out. The reason that happened was because of it's a combination of the extraordinary authority that the Florida legislature gave to Reedy Creek, and then the fact that Disney did not go forward with building the residential communities. Because if they had built a big residential community, Reedy Creek, you would have had to elect councilmen and mayors, and you would have had, the voters would have decided. And the audit goes through this, but I mean, Disney, like, they were very devious with how they did this. They would literally, they would control the few number of people who actually live there, and it was all at their courtesy. And as soon as your term for, you'd vote, you'd get elected, and then they'd kick you out when your term was over, and they'd cycle more. I mean, you talk about rigging the system. Man, this was rigged. I mean, it was unbelievable. So, but bottom line is there are absolutely legitimate uses for special districts. I would say the ones post-1968, I have not seen any of them that have been even close to what Disney has had. There were some prior to 68 that were just not as significant in the overall scheme of things, that had some stuff. I mean, Reedy Creek had a provision for extraterritorial eminent domain. So you look at that Reedy Creek map, they could obviously they controlled that. They could eminent domain outside of the district's boundaries. I remember I was at an event, I think, as when one of the salvos of this had happened, and the whole Reedy Creek thing was up in the air, and we were right across the border at somebody's house, and they're like, "Yeah, there's Reedy Creek." I was like, unless we go through with these changes, they can seize your house for eminent domain. You can do that. I mean, imagine the power of that, to have one corporation be able to seize property outside of this district. I mean, unbelievable and unprecedented. All right, guys, this is a good story, a good example of good government. Thank you.
Take out of here. I don't know where I'm allowed to go.